everyone. I'm Monica from Kempower. So thanks for having me here today. Okay. All right, so today I'll be sharing with you on the EV for the last mile delivery. I'm just going to stand, because if I stand there, you might not be able to see me. So I'm just going to stand here. All right. So I've been in the EV space since 2017, been working with also the different types of ecosystem stakeholders, such as on the energy side, the grid side, and also the logistics players. What are their, to understand what are their concerns, how do they perform their electrification journey of their fleets. So today I'm going to touch on this part which falls within the green box. So thankfully, unlike the aviation sector, this part is already both technically and financially viable. All right, but I need to make a small little caveat. When we say viable, it also depends on which vehicle class we are talking about. Okay, so if we are super strict about last mile delivery definition, then usually we talk about light goods vehicle, motorbikes, and so forth. Then that is already commercially and financially viable. But if we go a little bit higher into the medium duty and heavy duty vehicles, which is normally those that you use to transport goods from the port to the warehouse, or let's say we have items from Malaysia coming into Singapore, then those, it's a bit of a 50-50 depending on what truck models you purchase. Okay, so here on the left-hand side, the origins of the good can be from anywhere from retailers, e-commerce player, to a large warehouse like the DHL, FedEx of the world, to any ad hoc delivery needs that maybe a bakery or legal law firm needs to send a documentation on the day itself. So either they will transport the goods direct to the end destination, or it will have to go through a distribution center. And why do we care about all that is we care about the location of charging. So I will talk a little bit about that in the slides later on. Okay. So the demand for last mile electrification. So I think in the closing Q&A for the last panel, they were talking about regulations and so forth. So I would say it's pretty much similar for last mile delivery. So the companies are requesting for green logistics, and that is primarily because a lot of government policies, supranational agencies, including the COP29, that's why we are here today, they are talking about decarbonization of transportation, especially the land ones, because they are easier to abate. Financing bodies paying a little bit more attention, looking at your sustainability scores, and companies themselves with more ambitious ESG targets. So if we look into Singapore specifically, we have the larger players. So we assume that these SGX listed companies are the larger ones. They have the responsibility to do climate disclosure requirements, and scope 3, usually which is your supply chain, comes into the picture. So they have to declare that. And declaration is expensive. You need time, you need labor, and so forth. So MAS, Monetary Authority of Singapore, realizes that too, and is also giving grants to assist company for this transition. Okay, maybe another more relevant specific for the last mile is here. So Land Transport Authority and the National Environmental Authority, they have this goal, national goal, that all vehicles should be running on cleaner energy by 2040. And they have also given out certain incentives, which is ending next year or during March, for commercial vehicle emission scheme that allows you to reduce, you get a rebate if you buy vehicles that have lower carbon emission. And if you change your diesel or petrol fleets earlier than the COE expires, you can also get additional rebates. Okay, So those were more on the commercial B2B type of demand. What about us regular consumers? So I believe at least a handful or some of you in this room would be willing to make an extra payment if it's a green delivery. So also there are consumer surveys done that shows that people are willing to pay a premium, usually up to 10%. It's acceptable for them. So when I did a very simplistic check on the logistics option, so Grab, Lalamove, and Shopee, none of them offer us this option to opt for green logistics. Okay, so embarking on the electrification journey, I mentioned repeatedly that it's already financially viable. So back in 2022, I deliberately chose a reputable source, which is LTA. They did a computation for electric, petrol, and diesel light goods vehicle. And you can see that from a total cost of ownership point of view, electric is cheaper. Okay, but that was a little bit outdated in 2022, and it's over 20 years, right? So most of the light goods vehicles, they will be changed in 10 years. So I did my own back of the envelope calculation over here on the right with all this assumption, and it's even more optimistic. So electric van is half the cost when you compare it over 10 years. So logistics players as an industry, they have very tight margins to play around with. So changing to electric actually makes sense. So some of them are already doing it. And you will see later on there's a chart on how many of them have done so. Okay, so in my first slide, I was talking about, what type of locations we are talking about and where the vans will end up for delivery. Okay, so this is the where and when question. Unlike petrol, or diesel, it's very straightforward. But here, you have three broad scenarios of charging behavior. So on the first, we have overnight and break time charging. Most of these drivers, they would, either they live in a HDB estate or they go to a meal at a coffee shop or a hawker center. So HDB actually recognizes this, or should I say LTA, sorry, not HDB. So they are deploying 120 fast DC charging around Singapore. Okay, so there will also be 40,000 AC slow charging, which is adequate for overnight charging. And next we have the distribution centers and any loading, unloading bay of the buildings that the vans and maybe small trucks will be going to. This is what we call an opportunity charging, whereby it's no longer than 20 minutes. So with that, it's just a top-up. They are not seeking a full charge. And lastly, for the en route top-up, so this is a bit more like the petrol behavior, whereby they want a very quick charging at around 50 to 150 kilowatt worth of power. Okay, so the other consideration when people do electrification is, I can get the best quality vehicle, but how do I ensure the charging infrastructure will be good when I need them? So it goes back to the quality of the network in Singapore. So the government has established an EV Charging Act 2022, whereby it covers the safety and the reliable charging services by these operators. So this means that every charge point operator is mandated to report to the government on their uptime and the usage information and so forth, right? So this gives us consumers and companies the assurance that when we need them, they will be there. Okay, and no one can just have a charger and believe it would work super well for the next 10 years without intervention. So in order to have the good maintenance regime, there is also skilled manpower courses by ITE, by polytechnics, skills future kind of company to upskill our workforce. So as a conclusion, I wanted to show you this graph on the growth of goods and others vehicle from 2022 onwards to last month, right? So you can see that the growth has been pretty rapid. It more than doubled from here to here in the span of, say, 2 years. So this is good, but I would say it's a little bit, maybe not so fast. So maybe the government has to kind of incentivize people a little bit more. But I think end of the day, it really boils down to the corporations to realize that electrification is already feasible today. Because I think in most people's mind, electric cars are expensive. Because if you go and find a BYD or Tesla, you kind of use that as a guideline to shape your perception. Okay, and in terms of the availability of the chargers, right now we have 7,000 plus public charging points. So if you are a logistics industry with your own premise, this is not counted, right? So actually there are even more of that in Singapore. And this ratio is super healthy compared to other nations in the world with even higher EV penetration. So just roughly, I think 15 to 20 is quite common. So ours at 4, roughly 4, is more than enough for you, honestly. Okay, and my concluding slide is for the consumers, if we have the choice and we can really make it count, then hopefully companies will start giving us that option, just like how in Grab, as in Grab for car, not for the delivery side. You can actually put this carbon abatement thing, right? So if you can do that for delivery, then everyone has a choice here. Okay, so that concludes it. Thank you.
So hi, my name is Eric. I'm from Yinson Green Technologies. Just one moment. Yeah. Okay, thank you. So I'm Senior Business Development Manager, and I'm here to share with you about what Yinson Green Technologies is doing to decarbonize and help the ports become net zero. But before that, let me just share a video.
Marine EV leads the decarbonization of the maritime industry with our first electric vessels, Hydroglider for crew transfer, Hydromover for light cargo transportation. Our hydrofoiling solution cuts energy consumption and keeps the vessel stable. Battery swapping and megawatt charging at the port will power up the vessels. One day, vessels booking would be as simple as using a ride-hailing app. We're transforming port operations with a digital command center. The team is set to build a greener future by electrifying marine fleets.
So just to introduce myself again, so my name is Eric. I'm from Yinson Green Technologies, and we are priding ourselves to be our goal is to be the leaders in electrification for both land and sea in Asia. So just a quick sharing about what Yinson GreenTech aims to do. Basically, we believe that in terms of decarbonization, we believe that electrification provides a tremendous opportunity for us. And this is why we believe it's summed up in our motto, which is basically positively charged. So just to share that Yinson Green Technologies, which is part of the Yinson group of companies, is a relatively new unit within the group. But within the last 4 years they were set up, which is a relatively short period of time, we have amassed a tremendous amount of expertise and resources to really support the decarbonization and electrification of both the transportation and logistics sector for land and sea. So just to run through in terms of the units that we have. So firstly, of course, is the marine unit, a marine EV unit, which I am part of. In addition to that, we have the Charge EV unit, which is actually the largest charging network operator in Malaysia, with about 500 charge points currently running in Malaysia. And in addition to that, if you are going from Singapore to Malaysia, we work very closely with the highway operators to provide DC charging networks throughout that route. Then in addition to that is we have Drive EV, which is our leasing unit, vehicle leasing unit. So Drive EV basically takes vehicles, four-wheelers, like vans, trucks, and then we lease them to businesses. In fact, we are probably one of the largest leasing companies in Malaysia, with more than 200 vehicles leased out in Malaysia. Then we also have the two-wheelers, Ride EV, which is, we get two wheels like scooters, electric scooters, and we also lease them out to companies. In addition to that, we also have battery swapping stations for these scooters. Last but not least, we have digital EV, because we believe that in order to decarbonize, we must first digitalize. So digital EV actually provides all these solutions, software solutions, that powers the different units within the Yinson GreenTech ecosystem. But of course, to dive a bit deeper into the marine supply chain. So for the unit that I'm part of, Marine EV, our goal is to be the go-to solutions provider for maritime electrification in Asia. Of course, I think the first thing I want to highlight is that in order to tackle the greatest challenges in decarbonization, we must start off with the most important asset. And that is why Marine EV, we're very proud of the people that we have, and that we have the best assets to tackle the challenges that are in the maritime decarbonization space. So, specifically, what are the challenges in the maritime industry? So first things first, of course, is that maritime decarbonization requires immediate action. IMO, which is the regulatory body for the maritime industry, has set very aggressive targets for the maritime industry. I think this year's COP29 has added to that targets. And so it requires a lot of initiative and immediate action from the industry. However, so breaking down the challenges that the industry has to deal with, right? Scope 1 and Scope 2, we believe, are relatively well understood, relatively, I think, easier to tackle in terms of at least we know what the problems are, we can measure it, we can manage it, right? But where the biggest challenge, we believe, is the one that's coming up, which is the Scope 3 emissions, right? Scope 3 emissions, of course, is basically everything else, right? It's the equivalent of counting receipts in terms of carbon receipts for the industry. And this is why we believe that this will be at least the one of the three problems that we believe the industry will face. Reduction and reporting would be major challenges for the sector. So going a bit deeper into Scope 3 emissions, right, for the maritime industry, a lot of it is happening within the port, right? So one side of it is basically the goods and services that the maritime industry consumes. So, in Singapore, you see a tremendous amount of these commercial vessels coming into Singapore waters, right? If you go to East Coast Park, you can see so many of them, right? Basically, these vessels consume ship supplies. They need waste disposal. They require diving services to check the hull of these ships, whether they are in good conditions. And of course, some of them also require them to change the crew, right, that's on these vessels, right, for new crew to come on board and for the previous crew to go back to shore for their vacation and rest. But in order to deliver these goods and services, we require a big fleet of vessels that are supporting these larger ships that come into the Singapore waters. So we call this like small cargo vessels. So what's the impact of these vessels when you talk about servicing them in the Port of Singapore? On average, they travel about 20 nautical miles, and on each trip, we estimate that they are emitting about 1 ton of CO2. This is not inclusive of the SOx, NOx, and PM2.5 particulates that are being emitted for every trip that is being done by these cargo vessels, right? So these cargo vessels, when they are bringing all these supplies, they're spewing out all these pollutants into the atmosphere. Now, in addition to that, every ship that comes into Singapore, it's very likely they're not just using one of these vessels. They're using 2 or 3 of these supply vessels. And this means that it really quickly adds up with considering the number of vessels that come into Singapore waters every single day. We estimate that in a whole year, it's about close to 160,000 tons of CO2 emitted just from the services provided by some of these supply vessels to service the fleets that are coming into Singapore waters. So this means that we identified three key challenges that the maritime industry will face. One is reduction. Number two is reporting. But also number three, it means reliable green port services will become a challenge because the Port of Singapore is putting very strict regulations on the industry to change out these close to 700 of these supply vessels to fully electric or biodiesel. So this is where Marine EV believes that we can be the solution provider for the industry, because we have two of the key components required. Number one is zero emission vessels and solutions. We can provide the vessels together with the charging solutions. And in addition to that, we have the marine digital platform that we are developing. That means that every booking that is being done for these vessels that we are developing, you get an immediate carbon emissions calculations coming in to the vessel, right? For the moment the job is done. So it means that it really reduces your burden on the administration. So just to introduce a little bit about our portfolio. So we have several vessels in our portfolio. I think number one is the Hydro Glider. So this was launched during the OSEA this year, and it's basically a passenger carrier. So what's special about this vessel in particular is that it can carry up to 12 passengers, travel at very high speeds, up to 30 knots, and it takes off from the water, right? So it basically has wings beneath the hull for it to fly over the water surface. But talking about supply chains, right? So more cargo vessels. So specific to the topic at hand, we also have the Hydro Mover, which is the first fully electric cargo vessel in the whole of Southeast Asia. Carries up to 25 tons of cargo and can go up to 40 nautical miles, and was built with close collaboration from the Maritime Port Authority of Singapore. And of course, this vessel has been busy working and in collaboration with some of our close partners like Williamson and some of the ship owners like Eastern Pacific Shipping. Then because of the learnings from this first vessel, the cargo vessel that we've built, we are confident enough to move on to our second generation of this vessel, which is larger and can go further. And I think what is more important about this second vessel is that because of its increased size, we can replace two ice vessels, right, that currently are servicing the Singapore waters. So, and last but not least, just want to highlight a little bit about the future of travel, right? More passenger craft, but basically we are developing a series of ferries, electric ferries, from 50 pax all the way up to 200 pax. So, but what does this mean in the long run for the maritime industry? So when we introduce these vessels, right, it means that we can, for two of these ice craft, this conventional craft, one of our second generation vessels could be replacing it. And as you can see here, with the emissions from two vessels, we're looking at about more than 2 tons of CO2 emitted, going to 0.07 tons of CO2 emitted because of the efficiency of the grid, even with natural gas as our power generation fuel. So this means that it makes sense that to reduce the Scope 3 emissions, all the shipping companies should be looking at getting services from electric vessels moving forward. Then, of course, to make reporting a breeze, we've also created our digital platform where I shared basically to track, trace, and report on the emissions is going to be a breeze for any of these operations staff and administrative staff, addressing the second key problem that the shipping companies will be facing. So, in a nutshell, right, what we are seeing is that, so the key question is why marine EV and why now? We believe that we are able to reduce the Scope 3 emissions tremendously for the shipping companies that we work with. We can make reporting an ease for these operations teams. And last but not least, because of our expertise in scaling up infrastructure for electrification, we believe we are the one-stop solution to make reliable green transportation a reality for these companies. So in that, thank you.